If you've been following rumors regarding the release date of the RTX 5000 series for a long time now, it's been an emotional roller coaster. For whatever reason, many people for a while there were even saying that the 5090 wouldn't launch until 2025, which never really made much sense to me. In fact, last year I even firmly stated in a video that Blackwell was definitely launching in 2024, and that's pretty much it from my end, besides the odd updates here and there. Although, actually, on this last video, I've decided not to call anyone out on how they reported on it specifically, but I do have to mention that I've seen some people alleging with very eye-catching titles that this video claimed that there was no way the 5080 could come out this year, despite me not saying that once. Go watch the video yourself. All I say is one of three sources isn't sure anymore, and in fact, the file name for that leak slide was about laptops, and so was the video title and the timestamp. A laptop leak somehow turned into 5080 canceled, and actually even on the last Broken Silicon, which remember is recorded days ahead of time, I even said this:
we should be sure that the RTX 5080 will launch this year. Personally, I'm just saying my gut feeling, I feel like they're at least going to paper launch the 5080 this year.
So look, the way I would characterize the subtext of what I've been saying about Blackwell desktop over the past week is that things are just clearly changing. Things are a bit more up in the air right now. Nvidia might be shifting their strategy when it comes to Blackwell desktop launch plans. And today I have quite a few changes to disclose that are made significantly more interesting, I think, by not just saying what might happen, but by telling you what I've learned the motives are behind what's happening. And I don't think I'm going to show a quote slide for this one, actually. I'm just going to explain it, and those who watch the video will get it if they just listen. So, in summary, make no mistake, the RTX 5090 was planned to launch first, possibly even at the end of Q3 of this year at one point. And this entire time, the 5080 was actually much more murky of a product, and actually kind of still is, if you can believe it. I'll get to that in a second. But from what I am told, a decision was made less than a week ago that Nvidia is now planning to launch the RTX 5080 as soon as possible. But that might still be Q4, right? They're trying to launch it as soon as possible. It's not easy for them to launch it before when they might have launched the 5090. You see, AIBs I have spoken with this week don't know basically anything about it, at least in the United States. There's a little bit more information out in China, but the fact is that my OEM contacts working on laptops that will use GB203, the die that the 5080 will use, seem to still know a lot more than AIBs, even though the GB203 laptops aren't expected until early next year. So yes, I am told the 5080 is being pulled up by Nvidia, but this is going to be a rush job if it launches in Q3, and it won't be able to launch until Q4 if they want it to launch with decent volume. However, I'm told it might have decent volume in Q4, and that's because it is seen as a cheaper alternative to the RTX 4090 due to having less RAM and less silicon while hitting similar performance. And more importantly, this is where we get to it, because it can legally be sold in China. That's right. I am told that Nvidia's contacts in the Department of Defense, which they are always speaking back and forth a lot lately due to all of the restrictions placed on Nvidia importing things into China, I am told that the Department of Defense just warned Nvidia that the 5090 definitely is not kosher to be sold in there, and that they better not try any of that 4090D bullshit this time around with Blackwell. And remember, Nvidia has a stranglehold on mind share in China and Asia. They have way more of a percentage of the graphics market than AMD does in Asia compared to other regions, if you can believe it. And thus, it could be perceived as a slight, I am told by people at Nvidia, if they were to launch the 5090 long before the 5080, and then they'd also miss out on the early hype sales in that region when Blackwell officially launches. They just think it might look bad to launch the 5090 all across the world and then sell nothing to China for months. So yeah, basically at the last minute, Nvidia decided to emphasize the 5080 so that the first Blackwell GPU that is launched can truly be a global launch, and that way they have a bunch of fanfare around a next-gen Nvidia GPU launch in China before or around when AMD launches RDNA 4 there, so it doesn't seem like AMD is the only one launching next-generation GPUs in that region this year. But let's be very clear about this then. Nvidia pulling up the 5090 launch, it is not because Nvidia has had some change of heart and wants to be more pro gamer. No, the 5080 isn't the savior of the high end. It's a sanctions buster. And one that I think was clearly designed to be that if you look at the rumored specs out there. Now, I cannot independently confirm the rumored specs for GB203 that are being circulated right now, but what I can say is that they look very plausible to me, and to the people that say those specs look way too small compared to the specs of GB202 above it, maybe you should do the math on what this would be able to be clocked at to be legally sold into China. Because the math I did suggest that as long as this thing is clocked basically like below 3 gigahertz, this thing is just about at the 4090D compute level. And it just seems like, yeah, I expect Blackwell to have higher clocks than Lovelace. It seems like this was clearly purposely built to just barely hit that import limit into China. And so actually the specs I'm seeing for GB203, I am very inclined to believe them based on that. And actually, let me also add that though the AIBs I am speaking to still feel a bit in the dark about the final specs of the RTX 5080, that they feel like they're going to have to scramble hard to get this thing out even in Q4, I will add that I do hear that they are not getting the impression it's going to be charitably priced, shall we say. This is just their expectation from how the tone is talking to their reps at Nvidia, but it's sounding like it's going to be between $1,200 and $1,500. So, look, the 5080 being pulled up, the real story, I believe, is that not that it's going to come out tomorrow and be a great thing for high-end gamers. It's that Nvidia wanted to have something around 4090 performance that costs less to make than the 4090, that they could still sell for a ridiculous price, and that they can sell into China, and that it wasn't really intended to do that as soon as it's going to. And so I kind of see this as almost a small delay for the 5090 potentially, not as a acceleration of the 5080 actually, because it's still not going to be like the best thing I've heard of, and it's still not going to come out as soon as the 5090 was going to. So, in conclusion, the 5080 was basically purpose-built to do two things. One, be sanctions compliant right at that limit of the 4090D, and two, barely hit 4090 gaming performance while using a far smaller die and thus be easier to pump out to rich gamers in case the AI market stays hot this fall, which they expect it to, so that they will just pretty much paper launch the 5090 I'm expecting, and then they will just take the remaining 4090 8102 dies after they've launched the 5080, turn them into AI cards they can sell for more. And considering that we're seeing reports that Nvidia is still sneaking these cards into China, I don't think they're going to have any trouble finding something to do with the remaining 8102, and it'd be far profitable for them to divert them for AI uses and launch the 5080 as soon as possible so that gamers have something around the same level of performance. All right. Well, the RTX 5080 isn't the only thing I wanted to talk about today. I also want to dive into what the heck is going on with AMD Zen 5 Strix naming and segmentation. But first, an ad from a sponsor. This piece of content is brought to you by the Basis 60-watt Ultra Mini retractable USB-C cable. And you know, this is something that I actually brought with me on a trip to Vegas this month, and genuinely it did save a lot of space and work very well for charging or using absolutely anything that needs to use USB-C. You can use it to plug in peripherals to your laptop, to charge your laptop as it can support up to 60 watts through PD charging, or just slip it into your pocket so you can easily charge your phone on the go without having a tangled mess pop up when you pull it out from either your pocket or maybe a purse. And don't worry, Basis tests them to withstand over 50,000 cycles. They also come in multiple colors of your choosing, so at this point, I really do consider Basis to possibly be the best place to get cables and power gear, and this product is yet another one of the reasons why I love this brand. Support Moore's Law is Dead by clicking on the links in the description, and if you need a cable, buying one of these, the link in the description helps the channel a ton, and right now they are 20% off that you can click immediately with a coupon, but then you can get another 10% off if you use Retract60. You can get this for about $10 when you combine both of those discounts. So don't waste any time if you need a new cable. This cable is a fantastic one, and it helps the channel if you use those codes and get it right now. So support Moore's Law is Dead by supporting Basis today. So I gotta be honest, when I saw this article pop up on video cards suggesting that Asus had just outed that AMD was copying Intel's Ultra style naming scheme that they've used so far with Meteor Lake, I thought it was the dumbest bloody thing I've ever seen. I mean, come on, AMD. Have you learned nothing from the RTX 4080 12GB and RX 7900 XT silliness? Just because Nvidia does one thing doesn't mean you need to do something similar, because sometimes Nvidia makes a dumb decision they need to backtrack on that you shouldn't have copied. And so far, from what I'm hearing, Intel's Ultra branding is a complete disaster at retail that nobody should copy. I mean, one retail source of mine that was willing to be quoted said that Ultra branding has been a complete sales disaster for them, that people are confused about why Ultra 7 is somehow better than an i9, what Ultra even means, and why it costs more than an i9 or an i7 laptop, despite not demonstrating better performance. And while that's the only quote I'm going to show on screen, I just want to elaborate on like an example. Like somebody who works at a micro center said to me that like someone might come in and say they want one of the latest Intel laptops, and then they'll be handed an Ultra 7. And then they'll say, I don't want an i7, I want an i9. And they'll say, well, it's not an i7, it's an Ultra 7. And then they'll ask, well, is it higher performance? And the answer is not really, but it's kind of more efficient and it has AI. Then they'll ask, well, what is the AI used for? And they'll say, well, really? Nothing yet. And a lot of people just walk out of stores and say they want to do their own research or just pick up AMD because they're usually cheaper. Whether it's my contacts at Best Buy, Micro Center, Amazon, or a few retailers overseas, the Ultra series Intel is using is confusing the shit out of consumers, and it quantifiably hasn't helped Intel prevent AMD from taking revenue in laptop, which AMD has massively taken some laptop share last quarter without needing to copy Intel's naming. But, you know, if I may go off script for a second here when it comes to those AMD earnings, I do want to point out that AMD wasn't greedy in their endeavors to take laptop market share last quarter. If you look at it, it actually seems like AMD is starting a price war with Intel, even if it costs them some profits. I really do think that they're just hoping to close the door on Intel in 2024, just as I've covered in a recent video that I think you should check out if you want to hear more about that theory. And I don't think Intel can easily survive this price war either. Actually, I'm jumping off subject here a little bit to bring this up. In the past week, I have heard from multiple retailers that AMD is squeezing their margins lately. You know, I've been reporting for months, if not over a year, that, you know, at a lot of retailers, especially mom and pop shops, if you have like a 7700X, you can expect to make much more money in profit margins than if you sold like an i5 or an i7 next to it. That Intel basically gave you no margins and you're only selling Raptor Lake CPUs to get people in the door in the hopes that they would also buy RAM and a motherboard with it. That's not what I'm hearing anymore. I'm hearing that the profit margins on AMD are near zero. And so, well, this is still definitely a win for consumers. Just an FYI. AMD is being aggressive. You can see it in their earnings, and I'm hearing it from retailers. This price war is happening, and retailers are a little upset, but given the recent reports of just horrible news around Intel reliability, I just think AMD thinks they can also get away with squeezing retailers this year as well. But anyways, to get back on subject, my point is that I think if AMD is just straight up copying Intel's Ultra 100 series by launching an AI 100 series, I think that is stupid if that is all they are doing there. It needlessly adds more confusion to a naming scheme that I see so many people already complaining about online. However, I keep saying if for a reason, because I think we should consider that perhaps Asus accidentally hinted at something else could be going on here. Now look, this isn't something I can get confirmation on right now, so this part of the video has a lot of speculation in it. But just hear me out, even if I'm speculating. Hear me out. What if Asus just accidentally leaked a special series AMD was hoping to surprise us with at Computex? What if AMD is still going to have an 8050 series, and this AI 9100 series is some Z1 Extreme-like thing that Asus is getting special access to? I mean, they were huge assets to AMD in marketing their first Zen 4 APUs with the Z1 Extreme and the Asus ROG Ally. And does anyone still remember that AMD gave Asus timed exclusivity to their specially bin HS products with Renoir? Why not do something similar with a special Zen 5 series, especially given that AI is all the rage? And after all, What about that Lenovo leak from the same day as that Asus leak that showed an 8050 series? That 5 and 8050 instead of 8040. That 5 denotes Zen 5. And I see no reason to think that this leak is any less credible than the Asus one, based on who? They both look like legit leaks to me. So maybe AMD is overclocking the NPU in Strix with some golden samples and just binning them for Asus, and maybe Asus blundered that this is a special series that was going to be announced at Computex. Now, to play devil's advocate against myself, against the theory I just proposed, I do think that we need to highlight that it's very plausible that Kraken, or the worst yields of Strix, are what Lenovo was referencing with that 8050 series. Like, it would be so easy if we take the 8945HS, the Zen 4 Hawkpoint flagship that is already out right now, and then above that there will be something with 8 Zen 5 cores with an underperforming downclocked NPU, and it's called something like the 8950HS. And I mean, heck, the worst Strix yields could be dual sourced into this with Kraken, just like AMD is doing with Phoenix and Little Phoenix right now. And if Kraken isn't ready this year, which as of half a year ago, my sources gave me a roadmap showing that Kraken shouldn't be ready until next year. Whatever, just like Phoenix versus Little Phoenix, Big Phoenix launched first. Maybe they'll just use the absolute drag yields of Strix and shoot them in the 8050 series until Kraken is ready. And they'll just be like a mid-range sister series, the 8040 and the 8050 series. And then the best yields of Strix, most of the Strix volume, will indeed be put into this AI 9100 series of PCs. And in fact, maybe they're calling most of the Strix yields the 9 level at AMD because they know most of Strix is going to raffle stomp Meteor Lake, and they only want the very, very worst yields to be compared to their older series. And speaking of yields, a final thing I want to point out about this Asus AI 100 leak is that I'm not sure that we should be 100% that that 77 tops number isn't some sort of placeholder. You know, at first I was examining if perhaps this could have just been the tops of the NPU of a special series. But then, of course, I noticed a tweet that suggested that it was like clearly saying 45 tops. But then I then noticed if you subtract out the tops and from Hawkpoint, you know, minus 16 from the total of 38, and then you take Strix and subtract 45 from the supposed alleged total of 77, you get to 22 versus 32. Now, Strix has 33% more GPU cores and 50% more CPU cores. So I guess, yeah, it's plausible those together are only 42%-ish faster than the, 8 cores and 12 CUs in Hawkpoint. But then I noticed that if you average that out, 1.5 and 1.33, and then multiply it by what Hawkpoint's GPU plus CPU number is, you get really close to 32. So I don't think that we should discount that these are placeholder numbers created by simply averaging the bird's eye view specs that Asus is aware of from AMD that they've known for a while. Although the numbers are close enough that I think they could be real and final. And so just food for thought. They could be somewhat of placeholders there. I have roadmaps from 6 months ago that shows AMD was driving to get to more than 45 tops. And so I think it's either of one of two things are going on here. The first option is that AMD is making a special version of Strix that is just a custom voltage and microcode variant of Strix Silicon with special binning to overclock the NPU and maybe even target 45 to 65 watts instead of something lower than that to just further humiliate Meteor Lake with a product tailored to compete with it directly, just like they did with the Z1 Extreme for handhelds, and that's why they would be giving it similar naming to how Meteor Lake is currently named so that they're directly compared, unlike the other versions of Strix. It's either that or the second option, which is that legitimately, I guess AMD is just naming most of their Strix high-end models the same as how Intel is, even though I think that would be a stupid decision. And then they're going to take the absolute worst yields of Strix and downclock them into an 8050 series. Again, though, I really think that latter scenario would be stupid because unless it's for a special lineup to compete with Meteor Lake and humiliate them further, if most of your lineup is named that way, I just think it would confuse consumers more. But either way, I don't think it's going to stop AMD from crushing Intel Mobile this fall. Again, I just put out a video that explains that in detail if you want to check it out. And otherwise, well, that is mostly going to do it for this video. Although, unfortunately, I do need to give you all a health update at the end here, because on Tuesday, unfortunately, my last living grandma died. She had dementia and by now was very weak, so it was all expected to happen very soon. So it wasn't a surprise for me, but it definitely does still weigh on me, and I will be dealing with the loss over the foreseeable future, and I will have to take time off next week to attend a funeral. Additionally, if you can believe it, I was also hospitalized on that same day, Tuesday of this week, for hypertension. Yep, it wasn't related to my grandma either. I had already made my peace with that for the most part, even if I'm still saddened by it. It was just good luck, I guess, that it happened on the same day. But I do believe that there would have been some hospitalization or issue that would have happened this month no matter what, because it is clear that my blood pressure had been rising pretty steadily over the past few months, and I just need to take better care of myself moving forward. Now, the good news is that while I was in the hospital, they did CAT scans, blood work, and a full examination of my heart and arteries, and literally everything else is apparently in working order. In fact, it was funny, the doctor actually looked at me confused about how healthy my kidneys are, given my habits. So, yeah, I am mostly healthy, but high blood pressure does run in my family, and I think a few things that have happened recently, they could have been avoided if I just paid more attention to my health over the past year. So, look, here's what I'm going to say. There is going to be a new Broken Silicon plan to come out next week with Daniel Nenny. Don't forget that patrons starting tonight will be able to ask questions of Daniel Nenny. Additionally, there will be a new die shrink for patrons at the end of next week, as usual, if I find the time. And of course, I just did this big video, and I will try to do a video next week despite everything going on. However, I might be less responsive next week since I have a funeral to attend, and perhaps the die shrink will be a solo one to lessen the burden on me. We'll see. But the point is that I will keep going with the structure I have been going with for, I don't know, the past year or two if I can. But occasionally I may just have a week where the podcast is shorter than usual, or it's just a podcast without like 5 videos next to it as well, because I got to start working harder to keep myself alive. I don't think I'm good to anyone dead, and I don't want to stop doing this anytime soon. And actually, that last thing I said, I don't want to stop doing this anytime soon, that is a thing that I want to close on, just to reassure all of you. You'd think that I would have skipped a video this week, given all the crisis going on in my family recently, and that the hand I was dealt would have made me take a month off or something, but I just had too much fun doing research for this video. I couldn't help myself but put out another big video this week. I love this job, and I do not want anyone to take what I am saying at the end of this video as an indication that I'm slowly quitting or soft quitting or going to leave. I wouldn't want to do anything professionally but continue to run Moore's Law is Dead. I love it. But just know that until I can hire another person, maybe full-time, which please join the Patreon if you want to support improvements in content. Maybe I'll be less and less scared to just take it easier occasionally. Take half a week off. But yeah, that's it. That's the health update. Thank you for any well wishes, any support, and of course, thank you for watching now and hopefully continuing to watch in the future.